guess we're good to go. Welcome back to the Project Gen X podcast. I will get it out. I swear. It's not like I've done 130 some odd of these. Give
or take.
Yeah, that I should be able to get that line out without problems. So, take two. Welcome back to the Project Gen X podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Alan Smith, and today I am joined by...
Barry!
And it is just us again today because Dave, because life... is basically what it comes down to. Dave, at Dave's work, they are opening another campus, or they just opened another campus, and life is very hectic for him right now. So it's
to quote Skid Row, he's a slave to the grind.
Yes,
so
nice.
Yes, baby.
You know, I have been listening to an unusual amount of 80s music for me lately. For some reason, some of it is. When we did the songs of '82, we did the top 100,
and you were impressed that I could remember Key Largo by Bertie Higgins.
That's still just I cannot believe that.
I've caught more crap for that than anything.
There
else
were several pulls
podcast.
that you made on that one. That was like, wow, that's good. That's I mean, I am thoroughly impressed. You know?
The infamous Amy. Every time we go on a car trip now, and like an Air Supply song comes on, she'll just look at me and go, "You know this one too, don't you?" I'm like, oh yes.
Air Supply is one of those bands that like. I will never say that I love Air Supply.
True.
I would never even say I like Air Supply.
And yet
they do have a couple of songs that I'm like, it's not so bad.
It defined an era. I mean, it is what it is.
I think this sums it all up when it comes to 80s music for me quite a bit. Last week, I was sitting, I think it was actually Easter Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. My son was with his mom, and I just didn't go to my parents' house or anything. There was nothing really going on. So in the afternoon, I went to Waffle House because it was about the only thing open.
As you do on an Easter.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many Christmases I've spent at a Waffle House, okay?
Some people hunt for eggs. You were having yours over easy. So
actually, I do that. Over easy with pork chops.
There you go.
But I was sitting there, and the waitress that's in there, and of course I cannot pull her name for anything, but we're around. She's a little younger than us.
Right.
Probably in that very, very late 30s, very, very early 40s, like that. Late Gen X, early millennial, somewhere in there,
right there on the cusp.
On the cusp, like right there, that Gen Y, whatever they want to call it, to call themselves. And I was playing music, and it was like, I just for whatever reason, and it was stuff like, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. A U2 on their jukebox.
You played a U2 song?
No,
Shocker.
Playing a U2 song. And and some other stuff, but the very last song that I played was REO Speedwagon's "Keep on Loving You."
Ooh, good song.
And it came on, and she was kind of singing along with it, and I was like, "Have I ever told you how much I hate REO Speedwagon?" And she looked at me, she goes, "And yet you played the song." I was like, "I know."
Not only played it, I guarantee you sung along.
Oh,
with
I know
it too.
every word to that.
Yeah,
song.
exactly.
I was like, I hate REO Speedwagon. Like, I hate them with a passion. But I really love that song. And you know what? Riding the Storm Out, not bad song.
Amazing
either.
song.
Not
amazing
a bad song either. But you know what? The rest of their stuff can go fuck itself.
Well,
okay, I mean that's.
I don't know if I go that far, but it's just
come on.
It's generic. It's generic. It's
What's
the fact that you can't name them tells me a lot there.
No, there are other really big ballad in the 80s.
Oh gosh, there's like people screaming at us right now, and I can't think of it either.
Started out as friendship has grown strong.
Oh, I can't fight this feeling anymore.
That is one of the worst songs ever written. I'm sorry. That is up there with I Just Called to Say I Love You.
Ooh.
Or We Built This City.
Okay.
Or it just
I'm feeling a need for another episode about musical crimes,
Well, we've been talking and teasing for a while about this bogus podcast, like a whole podcast dedicated to like what I like to say, what the 80s did, because it's one of those things, and it's not just music. It's music, it's politics, it's movies, it's fashion, it's all the stuff, television, all the stuff where it's like, really, we thought this was a good idea? Like
one word, neon.
Yeah.
Enough said. Spandex. Take whatever word you like here,
Parachute pants.
Parachute pants. Zumas. Ugh.
Jellies.
Oh, God. Oh, God. Those things don't look good on anybody.
Exactly.
I don't care.
There are.
I take that back. There's only one person that can pull that look off, Jeff Lebowski.
I will give the dude that one,
he's the only guy I know that can wear jellies and make it look cool.
High-waisted jeans. I mean, come on. And I know they're back again for some strange reason.
Not just high-waisted, but high-waisted acid wash.
Oh, God, I know.
Ugh.
No.
Oy.
No, it's terrible.
Well, but the funny thing is, I'm sure our parents, when they were growing up or when they got to our ages, were looking back thinking about, like, the bell-bottoms and the butterfly collars and all that other crap.
I could go my entire life without ever seeing another butterfly collar, okay?
Oy.
Or that awful shade of brown that the 70s loved so much.
Oh, that weird kind of not quite tan, not quite mocha, somewhere in between.
Some weird ass, like, I know it's brown, but that's all. I don't know what it is.
We'll just call it sepia.
Yeah,
because it's basically
terrible,
like somebody took a sepia picture. It's just,
but I will not hear anything bad about bell bottoms. Okay.
See,
now, I'll tell you this. I have never owned a pair of bell bottoms. Mm-hmm. However, I am a big fan of the bootcut jean. I mean, I have been.
Somewhere in your closet, there's a pair of JNCOs, isn't there?
No, I never did JNCOs.
Oh, okay.
I never did.
Okay.
I did when I was in the mid to late 90s. I owned a couple of pair of baggies, but they were never like that. It was just and on top of it all, they weren't like 2 sizes too big either. They were like, they actually fit my waist, but they were baggy, which I liked because.
And some people can pull off the baggy look. If you're a smaller person or a thinner person, you can pull off the baggy look.
Which I was a lot thinner back then.
See, and I've always been a larger mammal, so,
Right. Well, I get it. And especially for my height, baggies don't always work.
Yeah.
Because
you look like you've been a part of a weight loss program or something,
It makes you look even shorter than you already are,
You look like a bell.
Yeah, really. And that's the whole thing. Like the whole JNCO thing. I knew so many people who wore those things, and then like you would go out and it would rain, and like
the whole bottom
were just soaked. Yeah, it's like,
soaked and muddy.
I had
ripped to pieces from where people walk on them.
I think the last pair of baggy jeans that I own wound up in a trash can in New Orleans somewhere in early 2001, if I'm not mistaken.
Just gave up on them?
We were there. I took them with me to Mardi Gras.
Job.
And believe me, by the time that weekend was over, or by the time Ash Wednesday rolled around, those things were not coming back home with me.
Oh, I kind of figured. I've only seen something like that happen one other time in my life. I'll never forget this. My 21st birthday was in Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay, Beale Street.
Yes, one of my best friends, Dave Pendragon.
So you were walking in Memphis.
Well, Dave and I went to Beale, and because
walking
we were
going 10 feet away.
All right. Well, we were going to go see a show at the Omni New Daisy. This is back when they had shows at the Omni New Daisy.
All right.
The opening act was the Electric Hellfire Club.
I've seen them in concert before.
The headliner was Guar.
I bet that's the same. I can't remember who opened. I can't remember who Electric Hellfire Club opened for, but I would not be surprised if it wasn't Guar. That was like 96, 97.
21st would have been, you're going to make me do math, damn you, would have been 98.
That might have worked too.
Yeah. 98, 99, something like that. But
yeah, because I was still going to shows back then.
Yeah,
so 328. So
yeah, exactly. Well, the fun.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I think it was 90. I could go. I could tell you what it was later.
He's going to go get the book
later. I go get the book and we can figure it out.
But I'll never forget this as long as I live. I'm waiting in line. And I had never been to a Guar show before, but I knew what to expect. There was a guy that was in front of me, and this was back when Tommy Hilfiger was like the end all be all. So he's in a Tommy Hilfiger.
He had no clue what he was getting into.
Collared shirt, white.
For those of you that
white.
For those of you that don't
shirt.
remember Tommy Hilfiger or don't remember how much Tommy Hilfiger cost. That was not a cheap shirt.
No, it wasn't.
And by 1998 standards, and I know this because I worked at a department store that sold that stuff. That shirt was probably $60, $70
in 90s
money, right? Yeah.
So the funny thing is, we're waiting in line, and he's in front of me, and I'm looking at this guy, and I'm thinking, you have no idea what you're in store for. No clue. He's hanging with his buddies. We get in there, the pit starts, and I swear to you, I was smart. I wore a black T-shirt.
Yes.
And I distinctly remember after the show was over, taking that T-shirt off, going out to the side of of Omni New Daisy and wringing it out in the street and watching the rainbow of colors that came out of my shirt.
Yes.
And then I saw old boy come out in that Tommy Hilfiger, and it looked like he had been hit with every color in the rainbow and a few that you've never seen before. And he was
beautiful,
pissed. He was so pissed.
He looked like a Jackson Pollock painting.
Oh my God. Looks like a Jackson Pollock painting that had been left out in the rain. Yeah. But he was so pissed. And I was just like, what did you expect, honestly? Did you not do your homework? I mean, come on.
Obviously not. Or his friends knew and didn't tell him.
And just left it out to dry, so to speak.
Right, you know.
But yeah, I'll never forget that as long as I live, seeing that cat walk out of there and just rainbow colored.
Oh, yeah.
Like, dude. So this would have been the show right after Jacques Cousteau had passed away.
Okay.
Because that was their opening bit, was they drug out, Odorous Orungus actually drug out a...
R.I.P.
Yes, R.I.P. Dave Brocky. A cutout of the Calypso.
Oh, nice.
With someone mocked up as... Jacques Cousteau on it with a fake head on top of it.
Yeah.
Then Otis comes out on stage with this big-ass sword over his shoulder and literally lobs the head right off of it as it squirts everything out into the audience. Oh, it was crazy, man. It was awesome.
Guar, yeah.
Loved it. Loved it.
They don't... I saw Guar a few years ago. It was one of the last years that the Warped Tour was actually touring. You know, they still do I think they do like 3 concerts during the summer now. I think it's like LA, Chicago, and New York or something, or some whatever. But they're not touring like they used to. Rob was in town with them, you know.
Oh, I think I remember this show.
Yeah, and I was but Guar was playing. Yeah. And like they were playing right as the sun was going down. Mm-hmm. And I had to walk past them to get out.
Ooh.
Of where we were to get back over to the... And it was one of those things where I was like, I think I'm far enough away to where I'm not going to get hit with
out of the blast radius.
Yeah, but it was very close because I did wind up getting some of whatever it was they were shooting out of those cannons on my shoes.
Who knows what all that
and I was like, whatever, it's Guar, you know. Kids were still enjoying it. You know, of course, you know, this is with the new singer, you know, and everything. I think they've gone through a big lineup change over the years.
They have, but I mean, I don't think that band was ever designed to stay.
No,
stagnant,
I mean that's because I know what's her name. Sly Minster's hasn't been with them for
she
years.
hasn't.
They have somebody new now.
When I saw him, she was with
them then. When I saw him,
that woman has an amazing voice. Mm-hmm. To hear her sing solo
I know she was crooning.
She was incredible.
I mean, she was straight up crooning.
Yeah.
It was like, wow. Why, this is not what I was expecting at all. You know?
I mean, she was incredible with her vocals. But yeah, it was just one of those shows that, you know, and the irony is so we went down on my birthday is July 6th.
Okay.
And we'd gone down, I believe it was the night of July 4th, because we were watching the fireworks go off and everything. And we were down and we were just kind of hanging out and, you know, passed out early on July 5th and woke up the next morning and looked, and I was so angry because we had missed the opportunity to see a band that I loved called Dred Zeppelin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They played July 5th, and I was just cussing up a storm. I was like, damn it, we missed this show. I can't believe we missed it. Blah, 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 blah. And then Dave looks at me and goes, look who's playing tonight, though. I was like, oh, yeah, we're down. We're so down.
Right.
We're in. Absolutely. So, yeah.
I've never seen Dred Zeppelin.
Oh.
They found such a unique niche of like, hey, we're going to do Led Zeppelin songs with an Elvis impersonator. And
in a reggae
style, which is like, okay.
But it worked.
It did.
It worked. That's the thing that threw me, is that it was like, you know, the first time I heard it, I think I heard their version of the Immigrants song.
Yes.
And I was like, this is incredible.
Yes.
You know, you have my passion for cover songs, and then you have this weird amalgam of different styles and different sounds, and it's like, I don't know what in the world I am listening to, but I am in love.
Hold on, right here. There was, and I think it's called The Last Resort. It's a Corey Feldman movie from the early 90s.
Yes.
And they play at the very end of it. Yeah, I mean, it's, hold on, I'm looking it up here. Again, one of those things that I caught like on HBO, like in the
Late
middle of
night,
in the middle of the day.
Oh well,
like,
that makes sense too.
Because there's nothing to that movie. It's not like some of Last Resort. And it's an
I remember that. I forgot that they had actually played in it.
Yeah, and they were like, as the credits were rolling, like they were playing, at the band on stage, and it's like, okay, that's pretty cool.
And the fact that their lead singer's name is Tortelvis just makes me happy. I was like, I don't know what this is about, but I am so happy to be witnessing it.
Just yesterday finished, I won't say reading, listening to an audiobook, a new book. It was just released this year called The 90s. It's by Chuck Klosterman.
Oh, okay.
It's his new book.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I always liked Chuck Klosterman stuff. I don't know if you've read Sex, Drug, Cocoa Puffs or
I haven't read them, but I've
he's written a bunch of stuff. That's he was a reporter for I think he wrote for Rolling Stone a little bit.
I think everybody wrote for Rolling Stone.
He's written for a bunch of stuff. He's written a bunch of books. I mean, they're all kind of like opinion stuff.
Right.
It's like observational type. It can be funny, but there's a lot of seriousness to what he's writing. And it's a lot of it is just like, again, they're kind of just like op-ed stuff. And this one was kind of cool because he didn't do like most books about a decade or a time period will do, where they'll kind of start at the beginning,
right,
and then end up at the
kind of work their way through the year.
He kind of talked. The book starts off talking about like how decades have never really started on the first day of the calendar of that decade,
right.
Yeah, and he went back through talking about how, like, the 1950s really started in like 1946.
Okay, I can
that
see
whole
that,
basically that whole baby boom, that
right.
post-war era, type where and went until about 1963.
Yeah,
and then the 60s lasted until like 1972. Like it was kind of one of those things like where 60, like what we know of the 60s started in like 64 and went to like 72, and then what we think of as the 70s actually started at Altamont and went until and went until like 1981. And that kind of, but talk about how like in 1990 or like how the 90s didn't start until 91, like late in 91, and he basically says it was Nirvana that kickstarted the 90s, which really and truly, especially if we go back and you look at like what was popular on the charts or the type of movies that were coming out in those first couple of years of the 90s, they were very 80s, and the fashions were still very 1980s, and all this kind of stuff, and then grunge hit. And Nirvana hit,
that changed
and everything changed. I mean, it just, and I was like, okay, that's cool. And then he said that the 90s essentially ended on September 11th. And I'm like, I get that, because if you think back to the year 2000, it was just an extension of what we had been going through,
Yeah,
and that's of course the whole world changed. But he posits at the end of the book,
right,
that was the end of decades, because everything from 2001 till now has just kind of been one long slog.
I could see that argument. Yeah, made,
and I'm like, I know, and the thing is, I hadn't really thought about it, in that way up until then. I was like, no, he's actually kind of right, because if I think back to 2004 or 5 or whatever, that kind of stuff, it doesn't seem any different. Technology's changed a little bit, or that kind of stuff, but it's like, it really just kind of seems the same.
Right now, there's a group of millennials that are screaming at us about how foolish we are about that. But,
that's
I can see your point on that.
Are we taking millennials seriously these days? I mean, come on, it's or Gen Z.
Just
or whatever.
Remember, these are the people that are going to take care of you in a couple
of years.
No, they're not. Or they're going to be paid to, whether they do
they're
or not.
not.
It's a different story. But no, I could see that argument. I mean, it's definitely one of those ones that, when you look at it, it's easy to kind of blend everything in from like 2004, 2005, I'd say all the way up into the teens and even into to modern day. It's
well. Let's put it this way: tell me that Britney Spears is any different than Billie Eilish.
I could see that argument being made, but I also see that there has
or Ariana Grande or any number.
Ariana Grande is a little bit different of an animal.
Tell me that. Okay, when you get into hip hop, that might change a little bit, because this whole mumble rap thing that's been around for a decade now, I can't stand. And I'll be honest, I can't tell you that Drake sounds like who was big in the mid 2000s. I mean, because a lot of it was still the same people. It was still Eminem and Jay-Z and 50 Cent. He was probably like the biggest name that came out of that early 2000s. Or him and Ja Rule, which Ja Rule had actually been around for a little bit, but he really hit during those early 2000s. And it's one of those things where it's like, no, I don't see a straight line from them to Drake or Kendrick Lamar or any of the other people that are in that category now.
I do think that it's developed, and I'll give Drake and Kendrick Lamar and a few others their due on this, because it does seem like they're kind of defining their own era, their own sound of that era, and that's fine. It doesn't necessarily mean I have to like it, but it's
not for us.
No, absolutely, it's definitely not for us. And I've definitely.
It's funny because everything we just talked about is not for us.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, even talking about like Billie Eilish, do I personally care for a lot of Billie Eilish's music? No, not really. But
she was just the first one that came off the top of my head.
No, I
mean, it's like but I mean, it's like you can. The thing is that you can go back to like a Britney Spears or Jessica Simpson or somebody like that from the early 2000s.
Christina Aguilera.
She's an actual singer, though. There's the difference between the two of them, the three of them.
Shots fired by Ellen.
That's true. Yeah. But, you can take those two or any number, or Mandy Moore, any number of those Bubblegum, Willa Ford or any of those that were out during that time period, and draw a straight line to Katy Perry and Kesha, and which I like both of them, but there's no difference between the two, or Miley Cyrus, or any number of that type of stuff. Billie Eilish is a little different. I'll give her that. That's just, but Ariana Grande, right along that same line.
See, but I think you're always going to have that standard. I mean, if you go back and look in the history of pop music, just in general, you're going to have
Madonna's different than them.
Well, but if you're going to throw Madonna in, then I would throw out like Lady Gaga. Because she's definitely she is the
not really teen pop, but
I was going to say the millennials Madonna.
Yeah, I know,
because she's trying different
I
stuff.
always argued that she might have actually been the millennials Marilyn Manson, but
I don't know if I'd give Marilyn Manson just because of her now gravitating towards a lot of like the Tony Bennett stuff,
but she's immensely more talented.
Oh yeah,
honestly.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it, and less of a shitty human being, but that's a different story.
It always goes back to if I stop listening to shitty people who make good music, I won't have any music to listen to. So it's but no, I mean, if you think about it, what we remember of these eras is the outliers. They're the weirdos. They're the ones that define their own sound. You have pop, you have new wave, you have grunge, you have punk, you have all of these types of outliers. I think the disadvantage that a lot of millennials have nowadays is that everything is kind of crossed over so much and blended so much that you don't really get that kind of defining sound. What is that? Is it Mac Miller? Is that the guy's name? No, it's not Mac Miller. It's the Swedish guys that wrote everything.
Oh, Max something or another.
Oh yeah,
Max Moon or something.
Max. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly.
Two guys. But it's one of those things that if you go back through,
like Ace of Base, and
if you go back into the mid '90s, and come all the way through until recently, because it's still making. Or actually, one of those dudes died, didn't it? Did Max die? I think.
I can't remember.
I can't remember. I have paid. But if you listen to all the stuff that they are responsible for, all fucking sounds the same.
Well, yeah, because
I mean, like, even to the point to where I remember a few years ago reading an article. No, actually, it wasn't even a music article. I think it was in Wired, where it was a technology, public or blog or magazine or something that was writing about this stuff, talking about how these guys would literally listen to the radio to see what was popular, and then the first thing they would do is that they would make something that sounded very similar.
Yeah, it's formulaic.
That was what was on there. They would change it up enough to where it wasn't, whatever. And then it was one of those things that they would go to whatever company and say, okay, we have this music that's ready to go, this beat, this, all this kind of stuff. Who do you have that's ready to go? And they're like, well, Beyonce or this or that or whatever. And goes, okay, fine. Do they want to write lyrics or do they want us to write the lyrics?
Right.
And then they would go from there. And it was very, very formulaic. I even just a few years ago, like I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, somebody talking about how, like, if you look on and Beyonce, if you look on one of her like the credits on any song, not an album but a song, there will be 15 people on there.
Yeah.
And what they do is
by committee.
They will literally rent like a chateau for a week, and everybody will go in and they'll all go in a different room and they'll work on, they'll all work on whatever, and basically she'll at the end of it say, "Oh, I like that part. I like that part. I like that part. I like that part." And basically, rather than writing music,
piecemealing.
it's a mashup. It's all it is. It's just and I'm like, look,
it's a different style of writing.
It's a way different style of writing than what I've ever been used to.
I mean,
whatsoever.
It's not good or bad. It's just different. And I mean, also, you got to remember, you come at it from the angle of a musician, of a songwriter. I come at it from the angle of a musician. We're looking at it thinking, okay, this ain't Lennon and McCartney. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
This is not, I'll write the music, you write the words, and we're just going to meld them together. It doesn't work like that anymore.
There's, like if you ever look at like a U2 album, okay? And if you look at the liner notes,
it's always about U2.
But the reason I go to this one in particular, because if you look at the liner notes,
right,
and it'll say something to the degree of music by U2, lyrics by Bono. Yep. Is what it'll say.
A lot of bands would do that.
Or 9 Inch Nails. Famously, you would look on the inside cover and it would say Trent Reznor is 9 Inch Nails. Yep. And it's like, which part of the reason that Richard Patrick wound up leaving 9 Inch Nails early in the 90s and forming Filter is because of, he's like, no, dude, I created that guitar sound. Yeah, this is bullshit.
Well, and but if you go back to it, I mean, you look. There's a very famous meme that's going around where it talks about showing the house band for Prince's Paisley Park, and it says, it's got a picture and it says, here's the vocalist, the guitarist, the drummer, the producer, the songwriter, and everything, and it's just Prince sitting there. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a different era now. I mean, you do get a lot of stuff that's done by committee, and is it better or worse? Depends on who you ask. Right. I mean, if you got to remember, as much as we love to shit on modern music, there was a lot of crap that you and I listened to growing up that was absolute garbage.
There's stuff I've listened to as an adult that I admit. I am the only one of the three of us who will sit here and openly say, no, I listen to some shit music.
Oh, okay. I fully admit that.
I don't even like shy away from it. Like, no, I love Kesha. I love Kesha's music. Okay, I absolutely do.
Different. She's
and it's one of those things that she was very different than what you had, because it was that whole, especially when that first album came out, right? That it was like, wow, this is a 20-something-year-old woman who's like, fuck it, I'm going to be the party queen. Yeah, and I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm not going to do any whatsoever. And it's just like, okay, I'm digging this. I am down with this. This is awesome.
And I have to admit, there's not many artists that the Simpsons of all people would invite them to use, or to ask to use one of their songs to replace their opening theme. Right. I honestly, I can't think of another artist that's done that, but they use TikTok. Or
TikTok.
Yeah.
Don't stop, make it pop.
Yeah, just the whole scene of the opening sequence was using, as if Lisa Simpson was voicing that. And I'll never forget watching that, just going, what in the world am I watching? But this is amazing. I love it.
I know. And it's like, and again, going back to if my computer's sitting right back here, if we opened up my iTunes, and went in there and started going through it, I know that your jaw would just be like, I cannot believe you have this on here, dude. I cannot believe you have this on here.
Dude, if you jumped on my Spotify, you'd see the same thing. So don't even worry about it. Don't even worry about it.
Because I've gotten, I got out of vinyl. I've talked about it on the show several times. Like, I'm done with vinyl. I'm done with vinyl, and now I'm like back in it, like 1,000% even more than I was before.
Well, but I think that's a good thing.
A couple weeks ago.
What'd you find?
Paul Abdul's Forever Your Girl album. Ooh. That I was like, do I need this in my life? Like, do I need this in my life? I ultimately wound up passing on it. But talk about a time and a place.
Oh yeah.
And again, I think there's we did a whole episode about, albums that spawned, like 4 or 5 or 6. Yeah. That thing had like 6 singles on it.
Well, and it didn't go away.
No, it kept sticking. It did. It came out in 1980 at the very end of 1988.
Yeah, it was
and
88.
It was 89 was when it really blew up. those songs were still being played well into the 90s.
Oh, easily.
I mean, Cold Hearted was still being played on MTV in 91, 92. Like, when I was graduating high school, it was still on. Basically, that album came out when I was a sophomore in high school and stayed until I was a freshman in college.
I believe it, man, because, I mean, and there's something to be said for the longevity of it. But if you look at it, you had other albums that would do that kind of stuff too, but that's one of those ones that you're like, okay, here's my question with something like that. Is it that the record companies are just trying to wring this as much out as they possibly can and try to get everything out of it because they don't know if this artist is going to have anything left? Or is it the artist saying, no, this is all my best stuff and I'm going to get it out here?
It's kind of weird because, like when you, for those of you, nobody else knows this because you weren't here, but when Barry came in, I was listening to Huey Lewis's Sports album.
Love it.
And I love that you're doing the sports, what's his name?
That's a shout out to our boy Ward.
Yeah, but what's his name does that? He was the drummer for the Black Crowes. He has his own Steve Gorman.
Steve Gorman. Okay,
Steve Gorman Sports. That's but that album has got 5 singles.
Yeah,
that was on there. Okay, and then you go to the next album, which was 4. And I think it had 4. I think it had 4
or 5.
I can't remember, something like that. I picked up Bryan Adams' Reckless the other day.
Great album.
That's got 6 singles on there.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about like, there's like, no. There were 6 songs on this album
Cuts
that
Like
were
a Knife,
released.
Run to You.
Cuts Like a Knife was on Cuts Like a Knife.
Okay.
No, but it's got Summer of '69.
Oh, yeah.
One Night Love Affair. Run to You is on here. Heaven. It's Only Love, the duet with Tina Turner, which is one of the best rock duets
it's great.
ever.
It's great.
And then I forget what the other one is. Oh, Somebody. I Need Somebody.
Yeah.
That's 6 songs. And then there's another song there called Kids Want to Rock. That if you ever see him in concert,
was
it released as a single? Because the thing is, if you ever go to a concert, he will do that song.
Yeah.
So it's
a great song.
Yeah, I know, and it is a great song. But not only that, but there are multiple albums like that, especially if you go back through the '80s and start looking, because all the Michael Jackson stuff, all the Janet Jackson stuff.
Right.
I mean, it's just like one after another, and it's like, okay, this is awesome. You don't get that so much now.
Well, and I have to wonder if that's just because they're trying to,
And then also with like what I said with Bryan Adams, you go to like the next album after that. He had like 3 or 4 singles on it. It was on down until he lost momentum. In the very early '90s. But even that album, with Waking Up the Neighbors, they
still had some great.
They released
songs
like 5 songs off of that as singles. I don't
know. I mean, you can make that argument. There are several. I mean, every now and then you'll get like a Beyonce that produces 6 or 7 songs that are singles off of one album. But I will agree with you that it's
Lady Gaga's the last one I remember doing that.
Gaga's done it a couple of times, and you'll have like some of the newer acts. What's the Japanese?
BTS.
BTS. Yeah. I mean, say what you want.
And I don't know any of their stuff.
It's boy band stuff. Yeah. It's the same stuff that we've been hearing. For years,
and don't get me wrong. Again, because
there's a market for it.
NSYNC and Backstreet both had albums that had like 5, 6 singles.
I'll give you one name. New Kids on the Block.
Absolutely.
Menudo. I mean, all of these. Every one of these boy bands actually produced a ton of
name
stuff.
a Menudo song. I mean, come on.
Cannonball.
I don't even know that song.
Oh, just because it was used in the movie Cannonball Run 2.
Oh, okay.
So
I don't know. And that's the whole thing. I knew the name Menudo more than I knew Menudo.
Yep.
That was always.
I think it was one of those things that was kind of the precursor to a lot of the boy band stuff. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, that was.
I've heard people make the argument that the Beatles were a boy band. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but
I will talk about my favorite Beatles being boy band Beatles. Like Hard Day's Night and stuff like that.
But my argument on this would be this.
Mm-hmm. Because they had the archetypes, all of them.
Okay, but how many songs did the New Kids on the Block members actually write?
Oh, none of them. I know.
How many did Menudo actually write?
None of them. I know, and the Beatles wrote
exactly. I mean, they were a self-contained unit at that
for the most
point,
part.
So.
I mean, they had other writers.
They brought other
especially
ones
if you go back and look at those early albums.
Well, yeah, because there was a lot of just covers on other stuff.
Well, it's like right there in my record. I have my dad's Beatles albums. I've got Hard Day's Night and Six and early Beatles and Abbey Road.
Yeah,
which again, Abbey Road is outside of that other stuff.
Right.
Like all the stuff that I have is early. My dad was a big fan of theirs, that early stuff, and not necessarily when they got into the later, even though he does have Abbey Road. But they had that archetype of Oh, they've got the cute one,
the quiet
one. They've got the silly one. They've got the artist.
Yep.
It's like or the dangerous one.
Yep.
Or whatever it is. And it's like though that carried through. Let's be honest. The Jackson 5 were quite literally a boy band.
Yeah.
Because they were all kids for the most part.
And they didn't really write any of their stuff.
No,
they
didn't.
They
had a whole bunch of other writers. But man, again, go down the line of all the hits they had.
True.
And it's and you could do that with a whole bunch of it's
right. I think when people. It's funny. People get into that argument of Beatles, Rolling Stones kind of thing, and whether they were boy bands and whether they fit archetypes and things like that. Did they define an archetype at the time? Possibly. Mm-hmm. I'll grant you that. But you could make that same argument about the Rolling Stones.
Oh, absolutely.
Make that same argument about
Stones were just
Kinks,
the Stones were the more dangerous version.
They were the bad boys. They were the ones.
That's been always been my argument about the difference between the Beatles and the Stones.
Well,
okay, is that the Beatles came out. And even though John Lennon was a complete piece of shit, even from the very beginning, as much as I love his music, John Lennon was a complete piece of shit.
Preach.
And it's one of those things that they came out, but they had this squeaky clean image, and they didn't get into a whole lot of trouble, okay? The Stones pretty much from the jump
scared your mom.
They scared your mom, and they got arrested for drugs, and they got arrested for getting in fights. And, it was just like all this stuff happened. It was like, oh, my God, what are we going to do? It's like, oh, no. Those are the cool guys I want to hang out with. It's like,
when you think about it, the toughest song that the Beatles ever had was something like maybe Helter Skelter.
Even their version of it is tame.
Well, but
by comparison,
you compare that to something like Street Fighting Man.
Oh yeah,
it's night.
Sympathy
and day.
for the Devil.
Sympathy for the Devil.
It's
night
like
and day.
Jumpin' Jack Flash. Any number of those songs.
It's night and day on that. So, but and again, these are two bands that I adore, that I love, that I will listen to any day of the week and twice on Sunday. Mm-hmm. But still, to give you a perfect example. The infamous Amy and I actually just got back from a trip to Atlanta. We went last weekend and went.
You guys are just traveling all over the place.
We try, man. Hey, the travel bands.
Hey, do what you do.
We're going.
Do what you do.
But this was her delayed birthday trip, and we went to the Fox Theater in Atlanta. Which, if you've never
been to the Fox,
I cannot recommend it enough. It is an absolutely stunningly beautiful old theater.
A lot of great concerts recorded there.
The acoustics are incredible in there. The feel is just it's like you just walked into the 1930s. It's just stunning. And we went to go see a Beatles cover act called Rain.
Oh yeah, they played. They started off in Vegas, didn't they?
I think so.
Yeah, that was that was Love, wasn't it?
No, you're thinking the Cirque du Soleil stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, Cirque du Soleil had a show called Rain, but they also had one called Love.
Maybe
that were both Beatles ones. This is the band called Rain,
right?
And they did mock-ups, and you saw the transition from like the mop tops all the way up to the Sgt. Pepper and all this other kind of stuff. And it was kind of funny because first off, the guys that were in it did a great job. The music was really good. They got the instrumentation down right. They did the mannerisms right. Mm-hmm. And I kind of leaned over to the end of it at Amy. And she said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, it was kind of nice to be able to see a version of John Lennon where he wasn't so much of a jerk,
Exactly.
It's just, you forget how much of a complete, total piece of crap
that
guy was, but he made great music,
I've said it on here many times. I said it earlier in the show. If I had to stop listening to all of the creeps that make music, I literally would have to get rid of the vast majority of the music I listen to.
And I'm sure that there are good people that make great
absolutely
music,
and I'm not giving any of them a pass whatsoever.
No.
None of them whatsoever a pass, because it's just uncalled for. It doesn't have to be done.
Nope.
Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be done. And as much as I disagree with Will Wheaton sometimes, I agree with a lot of stuff that he does comment on, but there's a lot of stuff that I don't particularly agree with. But he did say something recently about that. He was talking about Michael Jackson in particular. Somebody asked him about, should I still listen to Michael Jackson's music?
Right.
And he said, at the point when that music came into your life, it was something that you didn't know about all this stuff, and it means something to you. So no, I don't have a problem with you listening to with anybody listening to Michael Jackson, who grew up with because that music was already there. It had already established itself, and it means something to you that has nothing to do with all that terrible stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm good with that.
It's like
That's
watching a Kevin Spacey movie.
Yeah,
now. Or it.
Again, when that whole thing came out, no pun intended, with
nice
with his situation,
that
again went to the whole kind of like when the whole Michael Jackson thing, which
erupted.
I'm like, yeah, we all knew this, right?
Well, we all suspected it, and
but it's he had gone through 2 different trials,
and
I know he had not been, he settled. People forget he settled that first one for a huge amount of money
just to keep it quiet.
Even though it was already out there, but he just didn't want to go through all the stuff. I'm like, okay, fine.
Right.
When you get to the second time, you kind of got to start going, maybe something's here. And then when everything else comes out, it's like, yeah, we all knew this.
Yeah.
This was, go back to any of those late 90s Norm Macdonald when he was hosting Weekend Update.
It was one of his favorite targets. Him and O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, and he would. Like, and he would, every time there was a Michael Jackson story, he would always end it was like, it's because Michael Jackson's a homosexual pedophile.
Yeah.
Every time. He would say it every time, and the crowd would like die laughing every time, Or O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson killed 2 people, It's just like...
and I don't know. And so just speaking of Michael...
Hold on just a second.
Yep.
And we're back. Sorry about that. We had to. I had to let the dogs out, and because.
And no, not that stupid song.
Not that. And every time I say this, somebody's like,
well,
that has got to be one of the worst songs ever written.
True.
You wanted to say something about Michael Jackson.
So the infamous Amy has a daughter. Her name is Eleanor. Eleanor is special needs. She has Down syndrome. Absolutely adores Michael Jackson music. Will sing it at the top of her lungs. Trust me, I've heard it.
Yes.
We can't take a car ride for any length of time without Michael Jackson playing and her singing along with it in her special way.
Right.
And I've had several people that when they find this out, ask both Amy and I, are you going to tell her?
No.
And I'm like,
she doesn't need
why?
to know. Yeah, exactly.
Why would I do that? I don't want to take away or taint somebody's memories just because of this.
Right.
And it's kind of that same argument of, if you go back and look at all of the, as you said, so many different songs through history that were made by complete pieces of trash as human beings, doesn't stop them from being great pieces of music, So it's...
Exactly.
But I do agree that you have to weigh your own options. And
absolutely. It's not, it's not a blanket, this... one piece fits for everybody,
exactly,
type thing. It really is a, hey, wait, and it was after that Leaving Neverland documentary. I watched it, and I sat there, and the whole time, and this may just be my cynical, I was sitting there going, none of this surprises me in the slightest, and it was one of those things of whether or not it's true. It's still one of those things. None of this surprises me in the slightest. I will say this. Someone, my son's mother, okay, huge Michael Jackson fan, loves Prince, loves Michael Jackson, okay?
Right.
And I remember when we were together a decade ago or whatever, saying something about Michael Jackson being a pedo, whatever, and she's like, no, he's not, no, he wasn't. He was, he was like, he was robbed of a childhood, and that's the reason why, blah blah blah, that's the reason why he acts the way he does.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I've heard that excuse so many times, okay? And I just kind of let it go or whatever. Then whenever the Leaving Neverland thing came out, she completely disavowed Michael Jackson. She's like, I just can't listen to his music anymore and all that stuff. I was like,
well, it's the reality.
And we all knew this. This was not, or we all suspected this, and it's kind of like A&E just finished up a Secrets of Playboy.
Yeah, I saw some.
And I watched all of it, and it was really interesting, and I want to tread lightly here. Everything that came out in that with people of them talking to the ex-playmates or the people that worked for Hefner or this kind of stuff, there was nothing that came out that surprised me in the slightest,
it's...
There was only one thing, and I'm not going to say what it was, there was one thing that was mentioned that I was kind of like... If it happened, it wouldn't surprise me, but I just really don't. That might be a bridge too far to just fall into the, oh, look how terrible he was, because, not because of anything I'm like trying to justify. I'm just like, that's that whole overstepping just a little bit. It may have happened,
right?
But it's so far out there that it's kind of like, did it, or are we just piling on here? You know, that's
and it also just depends on which version of the stories that you hear,
right?
And so the kind of stuff. And I'm not defending anybody on
no.
this type of stuff.
Again,
but,
Hugh Hefner, I never understood this whole worship of Hefner whatsoever. I was like, no, I don't want to live. I never want to live that lifestyle. It's.
I mean, that's kind of like saying you worship Larry Flint. And
yeah, but okay. Here's the difference, though. Larry Flint never once tried to hide that he was a dirtbag. Okay,
fair point.
He embraced that shit and ran with it until the day he died. Okay,
who's the guy from Penthouse?
Bob Guccione.
Guccione, yeah, there's another one.
Guccione, like Hugh Hefner was all of this whole like, oh, I'm trying to change society's outlook on sex, which may be what he started out to begin with. Who knows? But really and truly, what it came down to is Hefner was trying to get laid.
Yeah,
that's all. And he wanted people to envy the fact that he was surrounded by all these beautiful women and this and that. And he really tried to cultivate this whole Playboy is a brand. It's something you should aspire to. It's blah blah blah.
Right. It was an image.
Larry Flint was like, dude, we peddle smut. I'm not even going to try
fair point.
I'm not even going to try to hide this, and I don't care who likes it and who doesn't. I'm going to do this.
What was the scene from The People versus Larry Flint where he's picking up an issue of Playboy and he's like, "Did you guys read Playboy, right?"
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. Did you find the article about how to tune up your hi-fi? All that interesting? I'm like, what are you talking about? How about the interview with Gary Trudeau or whatever?
Right.
Yeah. Like, no, we watch it or we read it for naked women.
Right.
Okay. Well, let's cut out all the crap and just get right to that.
Exactly.
But
well, that's also the whole like when he had his. Before he got shot,
right.
when he was talking to Betty Ford, and all that kind of stuff. And then when he gets shot, and like, what's her name? Courtney Love's the woman she played. She comes back and she goes, "Yep, we're in the smut business again."
Yep.
Just like, but so you had that, but then you have Bob Guccione who tried to straddle the two of those.
It wasn't Betty Ford. It was Rosalind Carter.
Rosalind Carter. I'm sorry. That's right. It was. That's right. I knew it was
Jimmy
a president's
Carter's,
wife. It was a president's wife.
Yeah.
It was Rosalind Carter. That's right. But then you had Bob Guccione who tried to straddle
that balance between the two, and
he tried to go. He tried to be legit, and then he also was. It was Penthouse, I mean, it was. It definitely was not Playboy.
No, and again, it's funny because I've actually been up to like Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, where one of the old Playboy mansions were, or the Playboy Club. Excuse me, the Playboy Clubs,
right?
Where they had, I think there was 10 or 12 of them around the United States or something, and they've now turned it into a. Like a water park for kids.
Nice.
And I was just like, wow, how this has changed. Oh, that's how this has changed.
Yeah, I know. It's I just in the mid 2000s somewhere, a friend of ours gave several of us, for some strange reason, subscriptions for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a Playboy subscription for 12 issues. And I was just like, they would come in, and I was married to my first wife at the time, and I was like, whatever, which, she was a photographer and, marketing, so it wasn't like the nudity didn't bother her in the slightest, And it was also one of those things it would come in, and I would literally like look at it, and no joke, flip to the table of content and see what the articles were in it that month. And I wound up reading the articles more than I ever looked it up, because they had like award-winning authors for one thing.
Stephen King used to write.
I know, and just what's his name? What's his name? The famous conservative.
G. Gordon Liddy?
No, that him and Gore Vidal just did not. They were friends, but they always debated each other. You know what I'm talking about. But he wrote for them for the longest time. What is that guy's name? It's going to kill me. But it just you have this very conservative pundit who is writing articles for Playboy. It's and I'm not, again, I carry the way about Playboy. You know, I mean, it's one of those things that we all looked at Playboy when we were young because we could get a hold of them.
Yeah,
you know, we usually had
it was easier access than anything else.
Unless you had woods around your house, and for some reason,
I don't understand that.
I don't understand that, but it happened.
There's
always happened,
and they always stash them in the woods,
and it doesn't matter where you go.
It's usually under a log somewhere or under a piece of bark somewhere,
or something.
By the time you find them, they're always rained on,
and they're ripped to pieces, and all kinds. I know, but it never failed.
Oh yeah.
It never, and it didn't matter because you hear people talk about that, especially around our age.
Mm-hmm.
Who lived all over the place. Who were like, oh, yeah, we found this huge stash
somewhere
in the woods.
Desert.
I know.
Them, you know? And right now, wherever Dave is, when he's hearing this, he's going, dear God, did they just spend 20 minutes talking about Playboy?
I know, and all
Hustler,
that stuff. It's like, yes, it's because it's all the stuff Dave won't talk about.
See what happens when you're not here, Dave.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's just obviously. Now that we're 50 minutes into this thing, you guys have probably figured out that we don't really have a topic this time. One thing that we do...
I think we're just going to call this one Old Guys Bitching.
Yeah, why not? I mean, that's... I was completely thinking of that earlier. It's like, we're two 40-somethings who are, complaining about kids these days. Yeah. Get off my lawn! It's like...
Is Matlock on?
Your damn kids and your damn loud rock and roll music, it's
you and your Drake and your Lady Gaga.
The Lady Gaga.
Jeez.
And it's funny to say that we're still like 10 years behind the curve.
Exactly. We're still. It's like that's your frame of reference.
Yeah, I don't know. It's it is what it is.
Hey,
something that we are before we get out of here, we're gonna plug this episode because it's coming up. It's coming up shortly. We still don't know when because there are schedules and there have been illnesses and there have
a lot of ins, a lot of outs.
Yeah, there's been. But we are working with our friends at GenX Grownup,
yes,
as well as the other Alan and Dave.
They don't have
a Barry yet. Maybe when we talk to him, we can. Hey, do you got a friend named Barry? You should bring him on the show. It's like that way we have. And what would be great if his name was spelled like if they got a girl and her name was Berr. Barry like this. Never. And then Lily and Hannah from Society Owes Me a Gen X podcast from across the pond.
Yes,
and we have put together a bracket of movies that we are calling the greatest movie about Gen X Tournament Challenge. Yes. I know that's a lot to get out there, and believe me, it's gone back and forth through many iterations and names and everything. We have all four of our brackets done now. Mm-hmm. Now, basically what it comes down to is that we have to all figure out time zones and who is available and who's this and that to where we can debate all the way down to a champion in this thing because we want to bring everybody together for it.
Because you are listeners of Project Gen X, you're going to get a little sneak peek on it. You're going to get a little trailer, if you will.
Kind of, yes. So we're definitely I'm going to drop a trailer in at the very end of this episode.
A teaser, if you will.
And believe me, you'll hear it again when we drop our episode because it will be the intro to it as well. But it's something that I put together for everybody. We want to encourage everyone to listen to all the episodes across all of them. I mean, go and listen. I mean, we will put links in everything to where you can go and listen to them, and go and listen to their shows.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's it's one of those things that we, like I said, Dave and I actually know the guys in Gen X Grownup. We've met them, we've corresponded with them for 2 years now almost.
I'm the new guy to the party, so I haven't had the pleasure.
And it's one of those things that you should go.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're going to be there this year or not. I know they were last year, and they generally go. But every year in Atlanta, there is the Southern Fried Gaming Expo.
I remember you guys talking about
this. Yeah, we went to it last year. Obviously, in 2020, it didn't happen. Right. I went to the very first one. Almost 10 years ago, and that I've been to a handful of them over there. I haven't been to. Actually, let's see. Last year was 8 because I have the thing. I have the T-shirt for it, whatever now. But it's I've been to a handful of them. It's always fun because it's people bring all the arcade games and stuff, and you can play arcade and video games, that kind of stuff. Basically, you pay one fee, you go in, everything's set to free. They have panels, they have different people like vendors, and it's a cool little, it's a convention. It's a arcade convention is what it is, and they were there last year, so we actually got to like see them in person and talk to them some.
Very cool.
And we kind of heckled them a little bit on their panel because that's what we do.
Well, but I would expect nothing less. I mean, shoot.
If we're gonna go down this year, if they're gonna be there, you got to go with us.
I'm down.
It's one of those things that it's an all weekend thing. But generally, what I've always done is I've just gotten up really early in the morning and taken off and drove down there and then drove back that night because Atlanta's like a 3.5-4 hour drive. It's not that.
Yes,
big a deal.
but you're down there. You have to go to the Vortex. You have to go to the Varsity. You have to.
Now you really don't.
Oh, yes.
Matter of fact, the hotel that this is in is not even in Atlanta proper.
Where's it in?
I cannot tell you off the top of my head. It's in one of the suburbs. Like, you never actually get into it.
You know me. I'll find someplace to go curling or something.
Oh, yeah, I know. But, yeah, those guys are really cool, and we've gotten to know, or I guess I've gotten to know the other Alan and Dave over the last month or so. Nice. They jumped on immediately, like, yes, we'll do this. Yeah, I was like, okay, hey, guys, chill. And then Lily and Hannah, I have talked to them quite a bit through Instagram and email and
smoke signals.
Yeah, something
semaphore,
like that. Just kind of try, like, so how many hours ahead of us are you? It's like 6. Okay, well, we can work that out. That's easy because if we all come in a morning time, it'll be early evening for them, that kind of stuff. So we're really looking forward to it, and I encourage you to go listen to all of
yes, unlike some other podcasts, we encourage you to go listen to.
Yes, absolutely, dude. I am not one of those people who are like, "Oh, don't talk about other podcasts."
What's the Taz show? Don't be plugging other podcasts.
Yeah, well, I have heard that
all day long.
I have heard that on so many shows. I used to, my old podcast that I was on for years. The guy that headed that up would get mad whenever I'd start talking about other podcasts. I'm like, dude, seriously, it's like that's what. That's not taking anything away from us whatsoever. I mean, that all that's doing is potentially bringing in someone else into the fold. Of like, oh, we heard this over here,
and they put out a great product.
Exactly,
these guys do a great job on what they do. So why not acknowledge it?
Exactly, and I'm all for.
And hopefully, they'll do the same for us.
And it's one of those things. Like I told all of everybody that I've spoken to from the other podcasts. I'm like, hey, as Gen Xers, we know nobody else is looking out for us, so we got to stick together. It's the truth.
We form a tribe.
Speaking of which, and I will say this, and I think you have listened to some of Gen X Grownup. I don't know if
I've
you
listened to a little bit of all 3 of the other ones.
They do they'll do like an episode where they kind of review stuff, or whatever their picks are for this, whatever they're into this week or this at the moment or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they do what they call backtracks, which they'll grab a specific topic and this last backtrack. Let me get the name of it so I can tell you exactly. But no, it is so great. Because I was like, oh, no, I'm right there with you. And I guarantee everybody in our generation is right there with it. It was called, and of course, I don't have it right here. Where are you? There we are.
Yeah, we're not working from the fly here at all.
It was Gen X Childhood Autonomy.
Oh.
And you know exactly what they're talking about.
That's
because these guys, like, they're all in Florida.
Yeah.
Okay? And they were one of them I think is originally from Georgia, and another guy, and I think Mo grew up in New York, and John was from Georgia.
Okay,
but they all had stories basically about, my parents worked, and so they were latchkey kids, or it was I just one day, got up in the morning on a Saturday and took off through the woods and didn't come back until like sundown.
Yep.
And nobody ever was like, oh, he's not coming back, I'm worried about him or anything.
I cannot tell you how many times I have thought back about some of the stuff that I used to do as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And just going, you know what? If I had slipped off that rock,
any number of things,
I had gotten stuck or anything along those lines, they'd still be looking for me.
The stories I could tell.
Oh, I know. I know.
The one story that I will tell that goes along with this, and it wasn't even, for those of you who listen for a long time, you know that I still live in the same house that I grew up in.
Yep.
And so my next door neighbor, so when I'm talking about this story, I'm talking about something that happened like, I don't know, less than 20 yards from where we're sitting right now, okay?
Fair.
It was, I want to say it was a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Because the neighbors weren't home, and they usually if they weren't home in the early evening, then that means they were at church on Sunday, which normally we would be too, but for whatever reason, we were home that night. They had one of those play set, the metal play sets that we all had, back in the day that were barely would stay on the ground if you swung too high. Even if they were anchored, they eventually would come loose. And
by anchored, meaning you had like an uncle or a grandfather or somebody that reached up, grabbed it, and pulled it down.
Yeah, pretty much in the ground. And yeah. Maybe there was an actual metal stake that was put through it or something. Or on a few occasions, I know we had one at one point, and my dad actually did put some concrete on the post, and which is funny because they still came out of the ground.
Yeah,
because it wasn't deep enough. It was just but they had one that they had a detached slide. It wasn't affixed to it. Okay. And which was a lot of fun. We would a lot of times and they Mrs. Moss that lived over there, she kept kids for that was like what she did. She was a nanny, and so there was always kids in the neighborhood playing with. And she had a daughter that was a year older than me, and it was one of those things where I was always over there playing. So we had, because it's what we did, one of the swings, the chain had broken on it or something, so there was an open spot, like there wasn't a swing there. Okay? I don't know who did it. I would not be surprised if I was the one that came up with this idea.
I wouldn't be surprised either, but go ahead.
So we took the detached slide.
Yes.
And we would position it underneath, or not underneath, but like slightly back from
the center
of the bar, and we'd get to the top of the slide, and then jump off and grab the crossbar and swing on it that way. And then we're like, oh, that was fun. Let's move it back a little further.
Oh God!
And we did this like all day, and it was fun. But no big deal.
Right until ...
You go forward a couple of days. It's the Sunday evening. And I went out there after we'd already eaten dinner, but I was just kind of like, it was during the summer, so the sun wasn't completely down. It was probably 7 o'clock or something like that. I went out there and I moved and I was jumping. I was doing the same thing. And I'm like, I'm going to move this back a little further. And I got up on top of it and I jumped, and my fingertips barely caught the top of this thing.
You face planted, didn't you?
No. Just enough to where I actually got them over the top, but not far enough to where I could get a full grip on it. So basically what I did is I swung and came flat down on my back.
How long did it take you to get your breath back?
I don't know. All I remember was laying there looking at the sky for the longest time, and then finally, I don't know if it was 5 minutes or if it was a half hour that I laid there. I remember my mom calling me to come inside because it was getting dark. And I got up and came inside and took a bath and went to bed. And that was...
I don't want to play anymore.
Yeah, I mean, because I very, something very similar to that is that the church that I went to when I was a kid, my dad was a choir director, so a lot of times, like when it was cantata season, if you went to church back in the 80s especially, you know exactly what I'm talking about. He was there all the time with choir practice.
Right.
And so there were several of us, younger, there were kids, that we were there, and so the basement in this place was awesome because you turn all the lights out and you're playing hide and go seek in the dark, which is the greatest thing in the world, okay? I'm running through this hallway. It's this long hallway, okay? Probably, I don't know. It may not have been as long as I remember when I was a kid, but it was long enough, And it was one of those things, the lights are all out, but there was, once you got down to the end of this hallway, you could make a sharp left, and that would go down to, there was an exit down there, and there was an exit sign.
Right.
So the only light is this red exit sign. I could see it coming around the corner. Okay, because
the halo of it.
Yeah, the halo of the light. Not actually seeing the exit sign, but seeing the light, reflect, off the walls basically around this corner. And I'm booking as fast as I can go, being chased. And I was like, all right, here we go. And I went to take that corner and was about 1.5 feet too soon.
Oh no.
The walls were made out of cinder block. To this day, I don't remember actually falling on the floor. I just remember being
Bouncing
on the floor.
more.
I remember running, stars on the floor. Just.
All right, I'll share one with you then. Before we get out of here, I'll share one with you. So when I was a kid, I had a next-door neighbor who was basically an older adolescent. I mean, this guy, had a four-wheeler that he used to drive around the back.
Yeah.
He actually owned a dragster.
Nice.
A full dragster.
Awesome.
So, I mean, he was the world's biggest 6-year-old. Great guy. His name was Alan. So, right in line.
Yeah, there we go.
But
what are you trying to say, Barry? As I'm looking around my room right now.
Hey, man, I play
at
the
comic
odds.
books and video games.
I played the law of averages, okay? So every year for 4th of July, we would do Bottle Rocket Wars. Which, for those of you that have never experienced Bottle Rocket Wars, this is essentially where you will take any form of pipe or bottle or anything along those lines and take bottle rockets, box missiles, Roman candles, any of those wonderfully explosive items, and shoot them at one another.
Yes.
For fun and profit. So we're in the middle of one of these. And my dad, when I was growing up until the day he died, actually was he worked in heating and air. So there was always PVC pipe.
Oh,
around.
yeah.
So we would take just, different stretches of PVC pipe, sink it in the ground, and drop these things like mortars.
You get a piece. I was going to say, you get a piece of that PVC pipe, and especially if it's capped on one end.
Yep.
Oh my God, that would be
just
amazing.
load them up and let them go.
And it sounds great when they go off too. So.
Or those box missiles that you just light them and turn them sideways and turn them loose. So we're running around, and there's like maybe 6 or 7 of us all just running around, including Alan. Well, I had a Roman candle, and I will never forget this as long as I live. They tell you that when you're firing a Roman candle, you set it off to the side from you and point it away from you. Well, I was pointing it away from me, but it was right in front of my stomach. So as I'm firing it, I'm like, boom, boom, boom. It was like a 10-shot Roman candle or something like that.
That very last one, though.
Gets to 7. I remember this. It got to number 7, and then nothing happened, and nothing happened, and nothing happened. And I'm like, well, maybe it just went dud. And then 2 of them fired out the front, and 1 fired out the back. And it took me a minute to realize what had happened, and I turned sideways and watched it skitter off me, and I'm like, oh my God, this just shot me.
Yeah.
So I'm run back into the house. I strip my shirt off. I'm looking at my shirt. It's charred.
Oh, yeah.
It's not burnt. There's no hole. It's just charred. And I had this section right in my stomach. It was a perfect circle of just this welt. It stayed there for a good solid week and a half. And I'm just like, it's a perfect circle of me. My mom walks in and goes, what did you do? And I was like, I could tell you, but you're going to be mad. So I finally told her the story on this, and she's just like, how are you still alive?
Yeah. Every once in a while, when I was in my early and mid-20s, I would start to tell some story like that in front of my mom, and she would always stop me and say, I don't want to know.
Yep.
I don't want to know. And as I've gotten older, especially, every once in a while,
that a lot more now,
something will come up, and I'll get about a 10th of the way into a story, and I'm like, you know what? I think you guys probably don't need to know this.
We're going to have the edited for television version for you guys,
I definitely led a very adventurous life at one point.
Robust.
Yes,
robust life.
very, very well-rounded person now because of it.
There you go.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us again for another one of our rambling episodes. These episodes always seem to do really well, though.
And
People
we will have Dave back soon.
Oh, yeah.
Promise.
Dave will be back soon, not just in the stuff that we've already recorded, but like I said, life.
Yeah.
And I get it because, my son had the flu last week.
Oh, sorry.
And it's been one of those things where there's been a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
You had Easter, you had just life. Stuff happens all of a sudden. It's so funny as I get older, I realize now how much my parents didn't let me know about when I was a kid. Because it's just life stuff that, you know what, he doesn't need to know what's going on, and it's just this bizarre, I had to have my car worked on not long ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can I really afford $2,500, in total, all this stuff. I didn't have it all done at once, but it was one of those things where, like, everything here needs to be done. And me spending $2,500 is still better than a car payment and everything that goes with that, because my car's paid off. It's still got a lot of mileage left.
And I guarantee that you didn't bring any of that to Xander's attention.
No, none of the clue whatsoever. Other than the fact that we didn't have a car for like a day because I had to borrow one of my dad's cars. I was like, no, look, it's going to be there overnight.
He was too content eating Frosted Flakes and
exactly,
video games, because
exactly.
that's what a kid's supposed to do.
Absolutely. So that's what I did. I didn't know about any of this stuff.
Nope.
Now, what's funny is that when I was a teenager, all of a sudden my dad decided he wanted to tell me about all this stuff. I'm like, I don't care.
Yes.
And it wasn't a oh, I don't care, Dad. That's what it was. One of those things is like, I wasn't dumb. Yeah. I was never told any of the stuff that was going on, but I knew.
Just didn't know how to process it.
Yeah, it was one of those things. As I got older, I realized, all of this was going on.
Yeah.
And everybody tried to make sure that I didn't know about it, but I knew what was going on. So it was kind of one of those things. He would start to tell me about something, and I'm like, yeah, I know about that.
To go back to the days of just all you cared about was Frosted Flakes and video games and cartoons.
Speaking of which, you're looking on
I was about to say, I'm looking over seeing Excite Bike and
I know
behind you.
All the stuff that's over here that I'm like, yeah, that's right. And I will I've still got to bring, I said this off air, but I have my Atari 2600 that I have to bring in here, and I have this whole setup here, with this old television that someone gutted, an old CRT, like one of the wood panel ones, and they painted it and they put shelving inside of it, and literally 4 video games, like to hook video games up, so the TV can sit on top of it. And I'm like, that's all cool, and I have my Nintendo in there, that's fine, but the Atari 2600 has to sit on the floor.
Yeah.
There is no. The 2600 does not sit on top of the television. Nope. It does not sit in a shelf under the television. It sits on the floor in front of the television.
And you are sitting right beside it because you cannot play it any other way.
That is the only way that is proper to play one of those games.
And I was going to tell you, I didn't get a chance to tell you this off air. Over the weekend, we were, kind of went to a variety of places just to kind of goof around. And I went into a junk store. And sitting behind the counter, unfortunately, it did not work, because if it worked, I would have called you and said, you need to spot me $200 because it's coming home with
okay.
ColecoVision.
Oh.
Yes.
You can get a ColecoVision for cheaper than that.
Okay. Well, fair.
I'll let you know that right now.
I saw it. I was like,
but yeah, ColecoVision is
you'd lose your damn mind on this.
I know we said we're getting out of here, but screw it. I never owned a ColecoVision.
I had an Intellivision.
I never had an Intellivision. No, I tell you, a few years ago, 10 years ago, whenever I was doing recycled relics, I was doing the flea market and had a store before it became the cool thing to have a vintage toy store. I sort of one of those things I've said about that for many years now, is I've watched all these places pop up around, because we have multiple around in the area, and it's wow, we were just a little ahead of the curve. That was the,
If you could have stuck it out, you could have seen what happened.
Well, I'll be honest, a lot of the reason we couldn't stick it out had nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
It had everything to do with
space.
We just didn't have time.
Yeah, space and time.
My partner got a promotion at work, and he was gone all the time.
Yeah.
And then it was a situation where at the very end of it, I was about to be a dad. I was about to be a dad. We were working on expanding the family, that kind of stuff. So it was like, I'm really not going to have any time when it gets going,
Yeah.
And I still have a few things from back then.
Right.
But it was, I bought an Intellivision during that time period, like for next to nothing. It was like same thing. And it was one of those things. I had a whole bunch of that stuff. Like
I'm trying to remember. Was it Intellivision or ColecoVision the one that had the Journey game?
It was ColecoVision.
It was ColecoVision. Okay.
Yeah. ColecoVision is an odd. ColecoVision originally had that was the only way you could play Donkey Kong.
Yep. I remember that.
That was like their big seller, was like, hey, we've got the exclusive rights to Donkey Kong. And then all of a sudden it showed up on Atari 2600, which I have one of those cartridges. That's one of the worst, because the Atari 2600 didn't have the graphic capabilities to recreate Donkey Kong, and it looks terrible.
Yeah.
It plays all right, but it's most of the 2600 stuff was like that, though, where it was like, oh, yeah, this is that game, but this is not that game, you know? The one exception might have been Ms. Pac-Man. They figured out some way to make that one look, at least, very similar to the arcade, but still not quite there.
Right.
We won't even talk about their Pac-Man.
Or Tempest or any of those other ones.
Yeah, or any Raiders of Lost Ark or any of that stuff.
That was horrible.
I never could beat that game.
It was
never could.
Well, it's still not the most hated.
E.T. I know,
E.T. is still the most hated one.
And there's plenty of those games that was just like, oh.
Yeah.
But those games, it's... I have debated getting rid of my 2600 several times. Mainly because I just don't play it anymore, and I also have one of those plug-and plays that came out like back in
with all the what do they call them, the ROMs?
Well, it was an official, that came out back in the early, I think it was like 04, 05, somewhere 03.
Well, because they had a 2600 version, they had a Super Nintendo
version. Right. But
the
thing is that the Nintendos were never official.
Right.
This one was like they actually Atari they actually put their name on it, kind of say, and it just looked like an Atari joystick,
Right.
And it's got all the games I care about playing on there, like Jar's Revenge and Adventure, and some
Joust.
of that some of that stuff.
Joust out, dude.
That are very 2600 oriented,
right. 2600 centric.
Yes, exactly. 2600 centric. The things that you associate with,
yes.
A lot of that like combat and, none of the Activision stuff, because Activision was its own thing, as ex-Atari workers who got mad for not getting paid royalties for their work, and they went and formed Activision and put out a bunch of really good games.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I haven't gotten rid of the 2600, though, is the fact that I have, like, the original Spider-Man game that Parker Brothers put out that you can't play anywhere else.
Yeah.
You could probably emulate it, but it's like there is no plug and play with that on there.
Right.
As well as a few other games like that I'm like, no, there is nothing else that I could do this unless I wanted to emulate it on a computer, and it's a whole other thing I don't want to do. I've never gotten into emulation because, again, I kept my Nintendo. I've got that. I even have the little the NES and the SNES minis that were put out a few years ago. So it's one of those things, I can play any of these games I want to. Hell, my Nintendo Switch, the Nintendo Online, but you pay $20 a year, and they keep putting games on there that's like, they have a bunch of NES games and a bunch of SNES games, and they just started adding N64 games on there also, and it costs $20 for an entire year, and you can play as much as you want to. And I'm like, that's pretty awesome, So it's like,
there's a reason why people keep going back and playing these games,
because they're awesome.
Well, exactly.
There's a reason that I have a Ms. Pac-Man arcade 1-up sitting in the corner over there, because that has Ms. Pac-Man and Dig Dug and Galaga and Galaxian and Rolling Thunder and Mappy and all this. It's like, because those games still hold up all these years later.
Yeah. And it's still fun to play. That's the important
thing.
thing.
And they're still hard as shit.
Yes. All right.
Well, we are going to get out of here because we could talk video games the rest of the night. We don't need to do that. Barry's got to get out of here because he's got to get up early in the morning.
So. I'm not looking forward to that flight. Anyway.
And I'm trying to figure out whether or not I'm going to go watch that Nicolas Cage movie tonight or not.
I've heard nothing but good things.
I know. Him and Pedro Pascal. And I'm like, I always enjoy when an actor takes the piss out of themselves by playing themselves.
And of anybody, it's going to be Cage.
I know. And apparently he'd been asked to do this several times before, and this was the first time he saw a script where he's like, oh, no, I'll do that. I will totally do that. So
there's a great episode of Behind the Actor Studio or Inside the Actor Studio of Travolta.
Oh, yeah.
Where they're talking to him about Nicolas Cage and, how they...
Face Off, yeah.
When they first met, and it was just talking about, they were trying to relate. Well, you got to remember Nicolas Cage's last name. His real last name is Coppola.
Right.
Francis Ford Coppola is his uncle.
Right.
So that's not the family that Travolta came from. And they were talking about.
Yeah, but Travolta was in a Coppola movie. He was in Blowout.
In a couple, actually.
Well, he was in Blowout.
Yeah.
Remember that was
But it's the whole idea of,
Or no, that wasn't Coppola.
They were trying to.
Who was it? Did The Godfather or not The Godfather? Did Scarface?
Oh God!
If you know what I'm talking about,
Scorsese. I can't remember.
No, it's not Scorsese. Anyway, go ahead.
So the whole scene is they're trying to talk to one another and trying to get to know one another and relate. And John's talking to him and saying stuff like, have you ever had just like that first sip of wine and how it just lingers and how it stays with you and all this other kind of stuff. And Nick just looks at him and goes, yeah. And have you ever had like that first bite of a hard cheese? And it's like, yeah, I get that. Or, and Travolta's like, yeah, that first bite of, steak or whatever. And then Nicholas looks at him and goes, and have you ever had a nice piece of glass? And Travolta looks at him and is like, no, I've never really thought about a nice piece of glass, but, and he was serious. He was talking about a piece of glass. I'm like, that's Nicholas Coppola, folks.
Yeah, there you go.
That's Nicolas Cage.
And on that note.
Yes. Seriously, go check out the other podcast.
Go check out the other podcast. Like I said, we'll have links in the description.
Stay tuned for the...
it's coming.
Our teaser.
Shortly.
Our trailer.
Yes, and the whole thing will be soon. That's all I can say at this point. Hopefully, next week. Maybe the next at the very latest. So,
and if you listen, when you're listening to it, see if you can pick out some of the background sounds. Some of them might sound a little familiar to you.
Yeah, there you go. So, and we're gonna have a good time.
Yes,
it's gonna be.
I'm so excited.
I know. So, everybody, I am Alan Smith.
I'm Barry,
and we will see you next time.
Later.
Welcome to the greatest movies about Gen X Tournament Challenge.
Not even supposed to be here today.
Dear Mr. Vernon, we accept the fact that we had to sacrifice a whole Saturday in detention for whatever it was we did wrong. But we think you're crazy to make us write an essay telling you who we think we are. And you see us as you want to see us. In the simplest terms, with the most convenient definitions. But what we found out is that each one of us is a brain, and an athlete,
and a basket case, a princess,
and a criminal. Does that answer your question? Sincerely yours, The Breakfast Club.
Excellent!
Ours is a story that can only be told across multiple podcasts and decades.
10! Where have you been for 10 years?
I freaked out. I joined the army. I work for the government. I went into business with myself. I'm a professional killer.
From 80s pop to grunge and writing to finally being an adult, we will debate the best movies about the best generation ever.
If I'm here and you're here, doesn't that make it our time? I didn't exhale.
Works for me.
The highs, the lows, and a whole lot of dead-end jobs will be explored.
Say a prayer for the youth of America.
I don't know. Drugs are out, sex is out, politics are out. Everything is on hold. I mean, we definitely need something new.
Everybody knows that the days are loaded.
So join us all, Gen X MixTape, Gen X Grownups, Society Owes Me a Gen X Podcast, and Project Gen X, because no one else is looking out for us.
Like fucking khakis.
Ew, get off of me. Ugh, I'm F.
And without further ado, the greatest movie about Gen X begins now. Or whatever.
Joe, it's Rex Manning Day.
What, no applause?
You met me at a very strange time in my life.
Try